Hey, Dog Nation. Welcome in to Go with the Flow, presented by R.S. Andrews. Glad to have all of you with us. And it actually feels fun to have a full slate of games to pick from again this week after no Georgia Bulldogs last week, no top 25 matchups of really any sort, including outside the SEC. Kind of nice to have what feels like a regular full college football weekend to go through here. And I'm glad to have you with us as we do. Of course, happy to have the entire Dog Nation team, Mike Griffith, Jeff Santel, Connor Riley on hand, and of course, Dari Payro from R.S. Andrews. He is here as well. If you've never played a game along with us before, here's how it goes. In just a moment, we will share all of the big games for the upcoming weekend, those involving SEC teams, those involving top 25 matchups outside the SEC, including Georgia and Florida. We'll ask you to make your picks against the spread. And, of course, when the consensus is formed, we'll ask Dari Payro from R.S. Andrews if he wants to go with the flow and join that consensus in those picks. And as we said before, it's always more fun when you play along with us, making your own picks for the games against the spread here each and every week. Of course, we've been doing this all season long. And before we dive into this week's games, let's give you an update on our season-long standings from a week ago. Dari and Connor, best performances of the week, also tied at the top of our standings. They were both 5-2 a week ago and knotted once again at the top. This is 2 consecutive weeks that you and Dari been tied there, including a tie in the actual games last week. So 5-2 weeks, 39-27 on the year. I'm just behind that at 36-30 on the year after a winning week ago. Jeff Santel also goes 4-3 there. That puts him at 533-33 on the year. And just ahead of him, Mike, after a losing week at 3-4, but still winning on the season at 34-32. So for the most part, following these picks is making you some money. Everybody at least 500 or better so far all season long. And that's a great thing to see. And Dari Payro, I guess I'll turn to you before we dive into this week's picks, as I often do. How you feeling about the slate? And I'm sure you're like me, if nothing else, just happy to have some real games to talk about again.
Yeah, this week's a little tricky. There's I'm having some back and forth on some of these games, trying to figure out how these game flows are going to go. This week's a little tricky with the slate we have.
Well, let's start the slate as we often do, as we always do when they're playing the Georgia Bulldogs, this time in Jacksonville for the hated rival that is the Florida Gators. Of course, folks remember the story here a year ago. Florida got the win against Georgia and won the SEC East in the process, snapping a streak of 3 consecutive wins for the Dogs against what I'd like to call those lousy, stinking Gators. However, fortunes have turned for this season. Florida's already lost 3 times coming into Saturday's game. Georgia riding high as the number 1 team in the country and looking at 2 touchdown spread margin as a reward for all of that. So minus the 14 points, Mike Griffith, will start with you. What do you think of Georgia here against that number?
They say JT Daniels healthy. That's all I need to hear. Georgia 37, Florida 21. Taking Georgia.
You see Mike's background there. He's got the stadium formerly known as the Gator Bowl. I'm honestly not even sure what it's even called anymore, but you see the Jacksonville Stadium there in the background for Mike. So easy pick there, Jeff, for Mike when it comes to Georgia. What do you think about the 14-point spread between the Dogs and the Gators?
Yeah, I think I'll take a stab at it. Isn't it TIAA Bank Field? Is that the new incarnation of the facility that Kirby Smart owns right now?
That is correct.
I'm going to go, let me see. I'm going to predict this is going to be a bountiful day for lip readers everywhere after the end of this game or through this game. You guys know what you know what I'm talking about there. I think we'll have a restart of the Gator Hater countdown, and I look for Georgia to cover that spread quite considerably.
So a lot of Dogs here thus far. Connor Riley going to keep that streak alive?
I am. I think this has a chance to be a close game, or at least around that spread. But knowing how much Kirby Smart dislikes Dan Mullen in this Florida program, I could see him being a little aggressive there in the end, getting a late touchdown to push this margin up. So I don't love it. I kind of really want to pick Florida here as an emotional hedge, because if I'm right, then I'm right. If I'm wrong, it means Georgia wins rather comfortably. But I'll take Georgia here minus the 14 points.
97% of Dog Nation daily listeners and viewers agree. I'm actually surprised the number's not higher than that, although 97% is about as high as we're ever going to be when it comes to an audience pick. And here's the thing to understand. Obviously it's a rivalry game, and there's this thought that anything can happen in rivalry games, and there's this thought that Dan Mullen's had 2 weeks to prepare for this Georgia team, and who knows what wrinkle he throws out there. But it's important to note, in head-to-head matchups between Kirby Smart as a head coach and Dan Mullen, what we saw last year for Mullen was the total outlier. Mullen getting not only the outright win, but the spread cover there as well. In the 3 previous meetings between these two guys, head coaches, Kirby Smart had not only owned Dan Mullen with the on-field straight-up result, but owned him against the spread there as well, getting the cover in 2019. Folks forget, in the 19-point win that Georgia got in 2018, Georgia's actually only a narrow favorite there that day. That was a game that was supposed to be close, but Georgia won it handily, to the credit of Kirby Smart in the head-to-head meeting. And folks will remember that in Mullen's last year at Mississippi State against Georgia, Georgia also won that game 37-3. Now, to some people, it may seem like it's an unfair comparison to say, well, you can't compare Kirby at UGA to a Mississippi State team that seemingly, by all appearances, would have been outgunned. But once again, Georgia was only a narrow favorite in Athens against Mississippi State back in 2017. And folks with keen memories will recall that Mississippi State was a popular upset pick that day in 2017, yet the game was not close, and Georgia really ambushed the Maroon Bulldogs from the word go that day. So when these two coaches have met head-to-head, it's been Smart who's had the upper hand, last year's result notwithstanding, and there's obviously a lot of mitigating factors of what happened a year ago in Jacksonville. So for me, this is an easy spread. This is an easy pick to make. I like Georgia here a lot. There's obviously emotion in rivalry games, but I think the emotion is also to the aid and benefit of the dogs here there as well. So it's a clean sweep for Georgia, Florida. Obviously, this is a partisan audience that's watching this. They enjoy hearing that. And Daria, I make no apologies for it. I think Georgia wins easily on Saturday. You want to go with the flow and join the clean sweep on the dogs against the Gators.
I'm going to go with the flow, and we're going to have a cold beverage to celebrate the world's largest cocktail party.
I like that. Getting world's largest indoor cocktail party for you right now.
Yeah,
I like that.
Yeah. And, I've kind of this is one of those games I kind of gone back and forth on with game flow. JT's healthy, so hopefully he's going to get a bulk of this work. If that's the case, I think Georgia should easily cover this number. I think they're a more dynamic team throwing the ball downfield. If it's Bennett, then, I don't know, maybe the game flow and plan changes of how, they kind of slow it down and grind out a victory. But I like Georgia to cover. I think their defense is going to give Florida some issues, kind of get some takeaways in this one. 46 is the number of points Georgia's defense has allowed all year, and 49 is the number of points Florida allowed last week. I think there's going to be some explosion. I like Darnell to probably have a breakout game in this one coming up.
Well, that's a nice prediction to make there as well. Fun to think, and great stat, by the way, too. Fun to think about Georgia getting that win against Florida on Saturday. And of course, we'll turn our attention back to the dogs before we're done here on today's show. Reminding you, this is Go with the Flow, presented by R.S. Andrews. That a moment ago was Dari Payro from R.S. Andrews. And obviously, if you want everything in your house to be flowing the way that it's supposed to, the air coming out of your vents, the water through your pipes, your plumbing, R.S. Andrews is the one to turn to for all of that. Also, at my house, the heat has officially come on, at least upstairs when my kids sleep. It's been a little bit cool last couple of nights, and I have a cold-natured family, so that means a lot of furnace units being turned on all around the Atlanta area. And if you're worried about your heating system not making its way through the likely very cold winter that's on its way, well, R.S. Andrews is the one to turn to for that. Get that system tuned back up to factory fresh specs before it gets too much colder than it is right now, at least especially at night. So rsandrews.com for a lot more on that. All right, another SEC game to talk about right now as Missouri travels to Vanderbilt. Vanderbilt fresh off absolutely getting blasted by Mississippi State a week ago, so much so that the post-game interview for Mike Leach of the Bulldogs was spent talking about Halloween candy. That gives you an idea of how competitive it was in Music City last week between the Commodores and the Bulldogs. However, Vanderbilt did cover an SEC play a week prior to that against South Carolina, but they are home here against the Missouri team that I don't quite know what to make of, other than the fact they're just not very good all the way around, but at least good enough to be favored by 16 going into this one. Mike, what do you think about Missouri traveling to Nashville on Saturday?
Yeah, that seems like a big number for Missouri to cover against anybody. I mean, this is one I'm kind of not sure about, but Missouri having the bye week, I guess I'll take Missouri to win 37-20 and cover.
First of all, what a time to have a bye week, the week before going to Vanderbilt, and what an endorsement there from Mike on Missouri of, yeah, I guess I'll take Missouri, but it's been that kind of season for the Tigers there thus far where I don't think anybody's going to put too much bass in their voice making that pick for Mizzou right now. Nonetheless, the line is 16. Mike is on the side of Missouri. Jeff, do you join him there?
I think this looks like a week to This looks like a week for somebody to pick that big of a number, especially against Vanderbilt, because we're talking about Missouri with that big of a number against Vanderbilt. I'm going to challenge Connor to say something unique in his take coming up right here, because I'm going to say it's not so much a belief in Missouri. It's a belief that Vanderbilt is going to Vanderbilt. I'm going to take Missouri in this one.
So Missouri, Scribes in agreement on that. Connor, how about for you?
Hey, Vanderbilt. I do it every week. It's worked most of the season. I'm going to do it again this week.
Wait, no, you're going against Vanderbilt.
Yeah, Missouri to cover. I'm fading Vanderbilt.
Yeah, fading. Okay, I misunderstood that word. Yeah, fading Vanderbilt here. Dog Nation Daily listeners and viewers, they are on the side of Missouri, but not by a huge margin. 61% do like the Tigers here. And listen, I think there's a time to take Vanderbilt. Vanderbilt's not an automatic go against for me, but there's a little bit of a reverse trend here where, and you saw this against South Carolina a couple of weeks ago, that Vanderbilt occasionally shows up on the road, but you can make a case that Vanderbilt's the worst home team in the country, especially when facing a big deficit. We've said this over and over again. They just don't stand up when facing a 2-touchdown deficit or more. And this is an example of that. I understand where Mike Griffith was coming from a moment ago when you look at a team like Missouri that's just objectively, unquestionably been bad this year, and you see who are they to be favored by 16. But then you remember just how frequently Vanderbilt lays down and dies in their own stadium. They get no benefit whatsoever from playing in Nashville. So I'll take a look at Vanderbilt again, plus the points when they're on the road, but not at home. All right, now I'm seeing nothing from the Commodores in Music City. So I'll actually take Missouri minus the 16. Mississippi State in this spot, an easy winner a week ago, I'll remind you. And Dari, it's a clean sweep again here, this time on the side of Missouri. You want to go with the flow and take Mizzou.
Yeah, I guess by default, I'm going to have to. This game is so bad. Missouri has yet to cover a game against the spread this season. They're over. And Vandy's probably the worst team in FBS. They may have a shot to win this game just because Missouri's not good. But I'm going to be disciplined this week. I'm going to take Missouri to cover. I'm staying away from Vandy. And like Mike said, Mizzou's coming off the bye. So 2 weeks to prepare for Vandy hopefully equals a 16-point cover.
That's a great stat. I didn't realize that. So Missouri has not covered a game all season long.
No.
Wow. What a stat. And really relative to now Missouri's doing pretty well in recruiting, as a lot of Georgia fans have become aware of. But on the field, relative to expectations, Missouri's been one of the bigger disappointments to me in SEC play all season long. Let's turn our attention to another very interesting game. Ole Miss, fresh off a win in the Magnolia Bowl last Saturday against LSU, and really, for the most part, except for the blemish against Alabama, riding pretty high all the way this season, finds themselves in tougher territory on Saturday, though, in Jordan-Hare Stadium from an Auburn team that's trying to figure some things out, and for the most part has in the first year for Brian Harsin. And they also find themselves favored here in this particular Saturday against Ole Miss. Tigers giving 3 at Jordan-Hare against Ole Miss. Mike Griffith, what do you think about that?
Yeah, it's that line surprised me a little bit, honestly, the way Ole Miss handled LSU, and gosh, their players weren't even falling down faking injuries. So that must be a pretty good team now. They're able to win without cheating. Try that one for a while, Lane Kiffin. I'm going to go with Auburn, though. Jordan-Hare Stadium, I believe, is a really nice home field advantage. I know Georgia was able to go in there and take some steam out of the Tigers, but they're one red zone play away from only being down at halftime to Auburn or to Georgia by a touchdown. So, and Ole Miss, I just don't believe. I'm not bought in. I mean, I'm just not all bought in yet. Maybe I should be. Maybe it's just wishful thinking, but I'm going to take Auburn to win and cover.
So interesting pick there from Mike Griffith, going with the home team. Jeff Sentell, what do you think?
Got some storylines here for this one. Is Matt Corral beat up and battered so much that he doesn't have much left in the tank? I think most Auburn fans are probably debating between two narratives. A, when is Brian Harsin ever going to get vaccinated? And then B, can Auburn just line up and run the ball on Ole Miss? I think that's the more likely scenario for me to focus on. I think Auburn will be able to control the line of scrimmage. They'll be able to play keep away. They showed some good stuff against Georgia. I think they're going to show some better stuff against Ole Miss in their front. Give me Auburn to cover this one. I think Matt Corral is going to try and pull rabbits out of a hat, but I think he's got too many bumps and bruises at this point of the season to really beat the Tigers.
And to be fair, circling back to a storyline earlier in the week, we actually don't know if Harsin's vaccinated or not. He's choosing not to speak about that. We also don't know if he's going to be able to put a jab into Ole Miss either. We'll find that out on Saturday as far as the vaccination status. We may never know that in relationship to Harsin. But remind me your pick one more time, Jeff.
Auburn to cover.
Auburn to cover. So, boy, a lot of Auburn here thus far. Maybe to the surprise of me a bit there. Connor, what do you think about that?
I made a mistake last week picking LSU against Ole Miss. I'm not going to make that same mistake again. I understand Auburn is the favorite this week because of home field, but I think Ole Miss is the better team on a neutral field. Auburn is coming off a bye, but give me Ole Miss here. They've responded to a lot of challenges so far in their season. As BA mentions, their only loss is to Alabama at this point in the year. So give me Ole Miss here to win outright on the road in Jordan-Hare Stadium.
88%, by the way, on the side of Ole Miss here, too. So they join Connor on that. Now, a couple of things. I want to act as my own ombudsman for a moment. Some people want to kind of hear me say this, that I have clearly been wrong about Ole Miss for most of this season. This is a team that has kind of turned the corner a little bit where they're showing up on a week-to-week basis better than I would have given them credit for before the season began. I've got to acknowledge that. And I also want to but point out a way in which I was wrong a week ago. I talked about unranked teams being favored against ranked teams, and now that was an automatic take for me. The game we picked last week between UCLA and Oregon went the other way on that. Oregon got the win in the cover. Also, there were 3 instances last week of an unranked team being favored against a ranked opponent. And while the unranked Iowa State team beat Oklahoma State, they actually did not cover. Only one game last week featuring the unranked favorite against the ranked opponent worked out to the tune of a cover. That was Wisconsin at Purdue. So fair on that. This is another example, though, this Saturday with Auburn getting the chance to be the favorite here against Ole Miss. But the number that matters to me more than anything else is, and Connor talked about Auburn at home. Let me give you the number on this. When favored at home, Auburn's covered 11 of its last 13 games. Now listen, that's multiple coaches. That's different players. Lots changed there. But still, 11 of 13, this is dating back to the 2018 season. 11 of 13 is a number that's hard not to pay attention to. And just given the contrarian play at heart here, given the fact there's a lot of love for Lane Kiffin, deservedly so right now, I'm surprised that so much of our panel is on Auburn, but I don't have much hesitation in saying that Auburn's the right side to be on right here. I'll take Auburn minus the 3 as well. Dari, the flow is on Auburn. I didn't quite think it would be, but it is. You want to go with the flow.
Well, Ole Miss is firing on all cylinders. The road team has won 5 of the last 7 in this series between them. But this just seems too obvious to take Ole Miss in the points here. So I'm going to take the Tigers at home. I think Bo Nix is going to make some plays against this horrendous defense. And like Jeff said, I think Auburn is going to be able to run the ball and control the clock in this game.
Speaking of fishy lines, y'all, I got to tell you, the fishiest line of all is the one we've got for you next. Something about this just does not sit right with me. And of course, we use BetUS for our lines based on where it is. Around middle of the week is when we typically make these picks, although you watch the show on Friday. Kentucky, who right now has an inside track on 11-1 season and a very interesting discussion at the end of the year if it can put that kind of record together, but only favored by 1.5 right now on the road at Mississippi State. This is an eye-opener for me. And you're left to wonder, what does someone know that I don't? So, Mike, let me see if you can tell me. What do you think of Mississippi State getting 1.5 at home against Kentucky right now?
Yeah, I'm with you. That's certainly an interesting spread that kind of makes you wonder. Kentucky and Mississippi State. I mean, I don't think this game is necessarily filled with highlights. I mean, I guess Mike Leach once coached at Kentucky as an assistant. Maybe there's some background there. The stadium, I mean, Alabama just blasted Mississippi State in Starkville recently. I know the series between these teams is tied at 24. It's kind of been a back and forth game. The home team has won the last, 5 games, I guess. But before that, I mean, Mississippi State dominated. Mississippi State is coming off a really good performance against Vanderbilt. Everybody kind of gets healthy off of them. But Kentucky's coming off a bye, I believe. And that's enough for me to think that this Kentucky team has grown up enough to win on the road. I hope I don't regret that, because the last few games they played there, they've lost by 15, 38. 26. I'm going to take Kentucky. I'm going to go with the Wildcats here. I'm going against my gut, but what the heck? I got to try something different.
We should point out, as Mike mentions, these two teams have played a lot. They are crossover opponents. They do play each and every year. Not exactly third Saturday in October between Tennessee and Alabama when it comes to the pageantry of Kentucky and Mississippi State, but they are yearly opponents. So it is Kentucky for Mike Griffith. Jeff Sintel, what do you think?
What was it Leach said in his post-gamer last week? He talked about candy innovation. What's on my mind with this one is offensive innovation. Now, the Wildcats, they were a couple plays away from making that Georgia game a lot tighter. There was a couple plays. Kentucky quarterback really impressed me. There were a couple balls he threw in the red zone, threw in the end zone. Probably should have been caught. Probably should have made that game a lot tighter. Offensive innovation, that's the brainchild of Kentucky this year. They got a new coordinator. I think he's got Sean McVay attached to his name on his resume. I really like what Kentucky's doing. I think Kentucky's got something special to play for this year, and I like for them to cover that number.
Connor, what do you think? A little bit of Big Blue Nation love right now.
This Mississippi State team is a physical bunch. They beat Texas A&M earlier in the season, and we look what Texas A&M has done since then. Kentucky's, I think, going to struggle to run the ball in this game. Texas A&M certainly did when they met a few weeks ago. And while I like Liam Cohen a lot and like what he did against Kentucky, or has done for Kentucky, this Mississippi State passing offense looks like it's starting to get things going. Obviously, the get-right game against Vanderbilt, arguably that might be better than a bye because you get some actual tangible on-field confidence that you have going into this game. It's at home. Mark Stoops has never won at Davis-Wade Stadium. And I like that streak to continue. Give me Mississippi State here. And if that holds up and Mississippi State wins and Georgia beats Florida, we could end October 30th with Georgia as the champion of the SEC East.
Connor, that's a very good point to bring up, and I'm glad you did. It's also a pretty bold pick on the side of Mississippi State. Dog Nation daily listeners and viewers, they disagree. 61% take Kentucky, but it's a narrow margin there on that. Connor, also join me on a little bit of a thought exercise for a moment. There's a very good chance that the ACC championship game is going to be an undefeated Wake Forest against an 11-1 Pitt team that lost to Western Michigan.
Mm-hmm.
There's also a very good chance that Kentucky is 11-1, manageable schedule the rest of the way. Only loss would be to Georgia on the road, in which Kentucky covered the spread. Now, they had to do a lot of stuff at the end of this game to do so, but it's still only a couple touchdown loss. Is there any argument whatsoever for Kentucky being better than the ACC champion at that point in time? I would say there is, and possibly even kind of a long shot argument to be an at-large berth in the college football playoff as an 11-1 team.
That's outrageous. I see the logic that you have going there. And I would mention as well, NC State, even though they lost to Miami this week, they can still control their own destiny. And if they beat Wake in a few weeks, you could see them as a 10-2 team, which would look real tough given they just got blasted by Mississippi State. I think this Pitt team is really good. And yes, they lost to Western Michigan, but Kenny Pickett might be the best quarterback in America. He might end up winning the Heisman Trophy if he keeps playing well. Check out the stats, Mike. Kenny Pickett is legitimately incredible right now. And so because of that, I would still probably say Pitt. If you gave me Pitt, Kentucky on a neutral field, I'd watch that game. I think that'd be a really fun game to watch.
Yeah, I'd watch that.
In reality, neither of these teams, I think, have a college football playoff shot.
So let me tell you why I mentioned that. And ultimately, it is a long shot. I do get that. But my point is, I think Kentucky thinks it's playing for something right now, even if it's ultimately just playing for a pretty record that doesn't take them anywhere. I believe they think they're playing for something. And as I think Mike pointed out, to get the off week the week after Georgia is actually probably a pretty good time to get that because it gives you a chance to lick some wounds. It scares me they're only a 1.5 favorite here because I think if Kentucky is being way better than Mississippi State, and I'm fearful here that the gambling gods know something I don't, which they probably do. So I'm nervous that they're only this small of a favorite. But, man, I really like Kentucky here a lot. As I said before, I think the Wildcats are pretty locked in. What they think, at least from a record standpoint, can be a truly special season. I think they give it their best shot on the road there on Saturday. So the flow is on the side of Kentucky here. I made my case as why. Dar, you want to go with the flow and take BBN?
I am. I'm going to take Kentucky here. I think they're going to get enough done with 2 weeks to prepare for this. This is going to be a close game. I think it's going to be like within a field goal either way.
All right. Interesting game. And certainly one of the reasons why you love those point spreads, because it makes games like this so much more fun for sure. We'll be back in the SEC before we're done with another look at Georgia and Florida and the total points expected there. Let's go outside the SEC for a moment to the Big Ten, where there are two top 25 matchups here this week, although admittedly the luster kind of off of certainly one of these because of the loss of the Nittany Lions last week to Illinois in the wild 9 overtime game. But even Michigan itself wasn't great in a win against Northwestern. Let's stay there, though. East Lansing, the spot on Saturday, as the Wolverines come into Sparty as a 4.5-point favorite. Longtime rivalry. Mike, you've covered this probably about 125 times. What do you think of Michigan State hosting Michigan on Saturday with the Wolverines, a 4.5-point favorite?
Well, I mean, College Game Day chose East Lansing over Jacksonville. I'm not sure how much of an indictment that is on the game in Jacksonville this week. This is not your typical. This is not the top 10 Michigan State of yesteryear. Mel Tucker is doing it with mirrors. He's got one hand on his cell phone, texting back and forth with LSU and Jimmy Sexton, probably top candidate. He'll get out of Dodge and probably double his salary somewhere else. That said, the Michigan choke factor is just something to behold. Somehow or another, Jim Harbaugh still hasn't played in a Big Ten championship game in 7 years. Is that not amazing? For all the money and USA Today's Nancy Armour saying that he owned college football, without a doubt, the biggest flop in recent history. I didn't take the last MSU in that Kentucky matchup, so I guess I'll take this MSU just because Michigan State gets up for the game. Can't really tell you why on paper, but their kids just play harder in this game typically. Michigan refuses to acknowledge this as a rivalry, says Ohio State's their rival, and Michigan State, usually found a way last year. They were horrible. They found a way last year. This year they've got a legit Heisman Trophy candidate at running back. If he was wearing a winged helmet, he'd probably be the Heisman Trophy front runner, but that's how it is in East Lansing. So I think they're going to take advantage of the moment and upset Michigan.
There is certainly a very interesting dynamic in this rivalry. As Mike mentioned before, it's really the rivalry that made the concept of big brother, little brother famous. That's where that phrase, at least to my knowledge, kind of came from, that Michigan State rivalry there. And Mike's calling for the outright upset, I believe I heard said. So with that in mind, Jeff, your thoughts there?
Number's 4.5, right?
Yes.
That's where it's at. This is one that makes you think a little bit. It makes you put it in the percolator and go through it. For me, it's really one of those, find out Saturdays with both programs. Are any of these teams really top 5 teams? I don't think so. But which one's the top 10 team? I guess in one of these, when you go back to these backyard neighborhood rivalry, emotional fest wins and losses type, I got to go with the team that I think runs the ball better. I think Michigan State largely is still built largely on a lot of transfers, a lot of guys that weren't, in the system a long time. I think Big Brother gets it done. I think Big Brother Michigan wins this game, and I think they cover that 4.5.
All right, split decision amongst the scribes right now. Connor, break the tie.
Yeah, I think this game could take place in under 2.5 hours. I think both teams are going to want to run the ball, keep things moving. Michigan is the more talented team here. They have a lot of players that I really like. Blake Corum, even though he's not Kenneth Walker in this game, I think he's really come on this year for Michigan. So I always sort of believe in Jim Harbaugh, and he sort of pulls the football out on me a couple of times, but I'll take Jim Harbaugh here. I like what he's done, turning over that staff. Mike McDonald, the new defensive coordinator there, has done a great job. And I would point out he's a Centennial High School alum. So I will roll with Michigan there, and I will roll with Michigan minus 4.5.
All right, so 71% of Dog Nation Daily listeners and viewers on the side of Michigan State. That's a little bit of an anti-Harbaugh thing there. I'm not quite sure how serious to even take that statistic, but they are on the side of Sparty here on this. One of the most overused cliches when it comes to rivalries is you throw the records out the window. Oftentimes in rivalry games, that's actually less true than you might think. However, in this Michigan State rivalry, this is one where sometimes strange things seem to happen, and that trend seems to repeat itself over and over again, where you kind of think of Michigan as the big brother in this rivalry, Michigan State as the little brother. In fact, as I said before, that's a phrase made famous by the game. But the Spartans have actually covered 7 of the last 9 against Michigan. If you think about Jim Harbaugh being a big underachiever, he's actually improved the number. He's only 2-3 against the spread in his 5 previous matchups against Michigan State. They're actually doing worse against Sparty before Harbaugh got there. The honest truth is if I'm betting my own money here, this is a total stay away from me. I have no interest in actually putting money on the line. For contests, it's a little bit different. I think that Michigan will probably be proven to be a fraud at some point in time. I think Michigan State's luck probably runs out before that this Saturday. I don't feel great about this. I feel a little bit better about the next game we'll pick. I don't feel great about this one, but I will take Michigan minus the points here. Tepid pick for me, but I'll take the Wolverines here. That puts the flow on the side of Michigan, or I should say the flow's actually on the side of Michigan State. Or you want to go with the flow and take the Spartans?
No, I think Michigan's going to roll them up. I think they're just going to pound the ball, control the clock. I don't think they're going to make any mistakes. I like Mel Tucker, but he's not really Mike D'Antoni, who really took this rivalry seriously about the details. They would have special team trick plays, all kinds of stuff that they would find on film to get the edge against Michigan. He's not that type of coach. And guess what? Michigan State hasn't beat a team with a winning record this year. This game is going to be close in the first half, but Michigan is going to pull away with considerable distance in the second half. This is my lock of the week.
That's awesome.
I love Michigan this week.
That's awesome. I mean, the fact that we're on the same side and you're as excited about your pick as you are makes me feel good, because I certainly don't have enough confidence in my own pick to feel as good about it as you do, but I'm glad to hear that you do. That's very interesting. The other ranked versus ranked game in Big Ten action on Saturday does feature a Penn State team reeling from a loss to Illinois a week ago against an Ohio State team that certainly seems to be figuring it out. They're now number 1 in Bill Connelly's SP Plus and ESPN.com after hanging 50 on the road at Indiana this past week. Really seemed to be coming together at the right time and favored by 18.5 points against Penn State on Saturday. James Franklin, a little bit of a faux pas this week when being asked about the rumors swirling around him, saying that his focus was on nowhere else but Illinois for the week, obviously accidentally referencing last week's opponent as opposed to this week's opponent, not exactly giving full confidence to the idea that his attention is squarely where it needs to be there in State College. But nonetheless, they're in Columbus this weekend as a 19.5 point underdog is where the Nittany Lions find themselves. Mike, what do you think about Ohio State, Penn State for now?
I think there's 3 teams left that can beat Georgia. Not that will beat Georgia, but could beat Georgia. If Florida pitched a perfect game and Georgia turned it over, of course, we've already picked that. Alabama has the firepower. And I think if Georgia were running to the Ohio State, the Buckeyes have the perimeter speed to exploit the secondary. And they're playing really well. They've really turned a corner. I'm going to go ahead and take them. This seems like a surprise pick, maybe because the spread is really a lot for a Penn State team that had Iowa pretty much beat down till their quarterback was injured. I think Penn State's quarterback's back now, and still I'm going to go with the Buckeyes to cover.
All right, so that's Mike on the side of Ohio State. Jeff, what do you think?
Brandon, you got me thinking. Maybe Coach Franklin just thinks he's still playing the Illinois game. Maybe he still thinks they're in overtime.
Still going on, yeah.
Give the man credit. That's a 9 overtime game. So maybe I'm not going to fault the fella too bad for that.
You may be right, Jeff.
I'm going to say confidence level 8.5. Ohio State's going to beat the brakes off of Penn State this week. I think they will cover. I think they will basically put on their mascara and their long eyelashes for the beauty contests to come. I think Ohio State's going to look really strong this week.
What is that Uma Thurman does in Pulp Fiction? Give you the square. That may be a little, but Connor, you tell me, is that a square pick? You like Ohio State here?
It's such a square pick, and I hate myself for this, but I've zigged already a few times. Ole Miss, Mississippi State. I'm going to take Ohio State here. I'm very dubious of this. They, in my opinion, while yes, they've looked good the last couple of weeks, none of the teams they have played have a pulse. I think this Penn State team is going to be up for this game. I like what they're able to do defensively. They're going to make them work, but I still have major questions about this Penn State offense and what they're able to do, even before the wonderful display that was the 9 overtime game against Illinois. So I don't feel great about this, but I just don't think this Penn State team is that good. Give me Ohio State here, minus 18.5.
So 84% of Dog Nation Daily listeners and viewers also on the side of the Buckeyes here. And I kind of joked about the idea of it being a square pick. The truth is, if anything, I have a tendency to be excessively contrarian, more so than I should. But when I have an excuse to be contrarian, I love to be. And everything screams Ohio State here. Buckeyes are riding high. They're probably the hottest team in the country right now, given the fact that Georgia didn't play last Saturday. Penn State, we all saw them look awful in a unforgettable 9 overtime affair against Illinois, where really was a blight on James Franklin's season there with the Nittany Lions. But in looking at this game a little more deeply, I actually found something that I would not have expected to see. Did you know that Penn State's actually covered 4 of its last 5 games against Ohio State? The only non-cover was a season ago when Penn State lost by 13 as a 10-point underdog. So this has been one of those things where Ohio State plays very few close games at all, but closer than the experts have thought. Penn State's found a way to do that a few times. Given the fact that the number is so large, that's enough of a permission slip for me to take the contrarian play here. I went favorite in the other Big Ten game, so I leave myself some room to take a flyer here on Nittany Lions plus the points. I love zagging when the rest of the world seems like it's going to zig. So I'll take Penn State plus the points, and I don't feel terrible about it. Dari the flow, though, on the side of Ohio State. You want to join the flow, go with the flow, and take the Buckeyes.
Yeah, I'm taking the Buckeyes. I mean, I think they're going to want to make a statement, big win, style points. They're trying to play catch up with, getting themselves relevant to try to make a run. There are still scenarios out there where they can be left on the outs of the playoffs, even if they win the Big Ten. But Penn State's, the difference between now and years past is Penn State's offense right now is awful. They only scored 18 points over 4 quarters and 9 overtimes. They haven't won a game in a month. I think they're going to have a lot of trouble putting points on the board to keep up with Ohio State.
No, I think that's a very interesting pick. And there's no doubt that Ohio State does like these dominant flexing wins. They've gotten a lot of those in recent years for sure. And that's one of the things they've used to bolster their playoff case. No doubt about that. All right, let's turn our attention back to the SEC in Georgia, Florida. Before we do, let me remind you one more time, though, you're watching Go at the Flow, presented by R.S. Andrews. You just heard Dari Payro there a moment ago. Of course, Dari's really an expert when it comes to picking games. He's been at the top of our standings all year long, and he's had, I believe, a winning record against the spread every year that we've done this show. But the thing that he's truly an expert at, he and his team there at R.S. Andrews taking care of you when it comes to your air conditioning, heating, plumbing, electric needs. So you can find them online at rsandrews.com, and they'll show up on time. They'll do the work that's promised for the price that's promised. That's how they satisfy folks. Story after story, they've been delivering smiles, and they can deliver a smile for you online at rsandrews.com. All right, Georgia, Florida, the point total, 51. Over, under. Mike, what do you think?
Well, they said that JT Daniels is good to go, so I'm going to go with the over.
Well, there you go. Jeff Sintel, how about you? Over, under of 51. Jeff, you're muted.
Of course. We were so close.
Hey, Mike, quick question. If a healthy JT Daniels was installed at Georgia, what do you think the line should be?
19.
19? Every time I want to go low on this game when I think about it, I think about, like I said earlier, I think about the venom, the toxicity in this rivalry. I think about what the lip readers are for in this one. And I think this one's going to go over. I don't know if JT Daniels needs to play like JT Daniels for Georgia to have a 35, 40-point game against the Gators. But with him there in spots, I think they can do so. You start wondering, well, how many is Florida going to get? How much is that offensive brilliance of Dan Mullen going to get? Every time I do that, I think I want to go over. So give me over.
Connor, how about you? What do you think? The number, what did I say, 51? Is that what we said?
Yep.
What do you think?
Give me the over here. I think Florida is going to try some big plays, try and set up some points. They actually lead the country in yards per carry. So I think this offense is going to make Georgia work. And as I believe Jeff or Dari pointed out earlier, this Florida defense is atrocious. So I think that recipe right there sort of lends itself to the over. I think Georgia on its own could get 40 here. And if it does, it should easily clear that over at 51.
Dog Nation Daily listeners and viewers on the side of the under to the tune of 60, I think 63% have the under here. So it's not a wild number there. The under's actually been pretty profitable as of late for Georgia. 3 straight games have gone under. The 3 prior to that have been over, but the last start for JT Daniels against Clemson, that was an under. The bowl game against Cincinnati, that was an under. However, they were overs in the the 3 previous starts for Daniels before that. So if he is going to play the lion's share of the snaps on Saturday, if you at least have it as a consideration, it's not a guaranteed over with Daniels in the game, although certainly going over more than they had before.
Didn't he start against South Carolina, BA?
The South Carolina game for Georgia was also an over. Yeah. So an over against South Carolina. And an under against Clemson thus far for him this season. If I misspoke on that, I apologize. So he's 1-1 against the total thus far this year. And if you want to go back to last year, what I say, 1 under 3 overs for a year ago. So he's been more overs than not in his time as Georgia quarterback. But still, for me, the under's just the safer play. Now, listen, I don't have any misgivings about this. I've gotten it wrong over under on Georgia a lot this year, and I've guessed it wrong on both sides of that. But for now, I'm going to ride what has been the dominant streak for Georgia as of late, 3 consecutive unders. So it's still possible to get an easy win, even with a game like this going under, given how successful the Georgia defense has been. Bottom line is, I'm going to stop talking after this. I like the under. I have no idea what the flow is because I've talked so long. Flow is on the side of the over. Dar, you want to go with the flow and take the over?
Yeah, I'm going to take the over. I think this game goes over. I think Florida may get 17 or 20 points in this game. I think they're going to have some, Mullen's going to pull some of his old Dak Prescott playbook gadgets and try to, hit him with some stuff. But I think Georgia's running game is just going to be too much for Florida. I think they're going to be probably scoring in the high 30s, maybe 40s. What's interesting is if you look at the historicals in this rivalry over the past 10 years, crossing over 50 points has only happened 3 times.
Interesting.
So that kind of leans under. But I think this year, kind of where it's at, like Mike said, a healthy JT, I like the over.
Well, there you go. Very interesting all the way around. All right. So great slate of games coming up this weekend. Great to see Georgia, Florida on the docket here. Great to see the Dogs back in action against anybody after the week off last week. Also a couple of fun games when it comes to top 25 there as well. And really some intrigue about some of the other games involving top 25 foes outside the SEC against unranked opponents there too. Should be a interesting college football Saturday all the way around. Dar, how about a World Series pick? What do you think about the now, of course, we're doing this show on a game. We'll actually test you when the show airs on Friday because we've got one game in the books right now with game 2 coming for us as we're recording this. How you feel about the Braves rolling through the rest of this year?
I like the Braves. I like them to win that game last night. That's huge. We'll see how much tonight. I mean, it's concerning with Morton. That's going to kind of mix some things up on the back end of the rotation. That kind of really hurts the Braves. But man, the bats are alive. I love it. So
no doubt.
I'm excited, man. I hope they can close this out.
Ricky's mistake by me by asking a question that dates the broadcast. I apologize for that. But nonetheless, fun time with the World Series rolling through as we get ready for college football on Saturday there as well. Appreciate all of you being here with us for Go With The Flow, presented by R.S. Andrews. Best of luck with your picks here this week. Don't forget, BetUS.com, the source that we use for the point spread data that we use here on the show. And, of course, check out RSAndrews.com. That's your source for all your air conditioning, heating, plumbing, and electric needs. Enjoy the games. See you back here again next week at this same time for Go With The Flow.